we do and how we're moving more and more towards the 3D printing space, which traditionally we've been part of, but kind of on the periphery. Our background tended to be more on the simulation side. But now our technology is really taking off in several directions, and this is one of them. So the title, just converting 3D images to models for anatomical 3D printing. So just to give you an idea of the Simpleware product group, we develop, again, high-end 3D image processing software and solutions. So off-the-shelf software to convert 3D images to models. That's segmentation and all of those typical tools you'd expect from any kind of software like this. And also, we developed end-to-end solutions, customized solutions, OEMing some of our libraries, things of that nature with customers. So we're definitely a software company, and that's our main focus. And we are a tool developer to enable our customers to go through this 3D image to model workflow in its various different forms. So we have dedicated sales, support, and services teams around the world. Mostly in clinical life sciences is our main applications, but we also have applications in materials and manufacturing, more on the industrial side of things as well. So the main focus for here is Simpleware Scan IP Medical. That's what's being used for point of care 3D printing. It's really our flagship medical image processing platform. This has the full regulatory clearances, CE marked, FDA clearance. Recently, we also got within the 3D printing space, the FDA clearance for that. So this is really our main flagship product that's off the shelf, kind of our off the shelf solution that we've got. So what does Simpleware offer me? So for here, I'll just quickly talk about a patient-specific, more in the patient-specific device guide or kind of 3D printing example. The workflow tends to be the same, although the final application can be different. So again, this is based off of patient CT and our MRI data, 3D, 4D CT. We have those imports, all DICOM data that most people are obviously I'm preaching to the choir here. So to generate an accurate and complete model of patient anatomy, tailor your devices or guides to your patient requirements during that design workflow. We do have a new addition of an integrated 3D printing toolkit to speed 3D printing prep. So that's fully integrated into the software. And then you can export STL, 3MF files, things of that nature that are intended for 3D printing. So the idea here is to build the ideal model for your patient from a single platform. So everybody's familiar with this patient-specific workflow, going from a 3D image to a model. You have your DICOM data, your 3D model on the right, and even farther is your different applications, whether it's devices or guide, surgical planning, 3D printing, traditional medical device R&D, and you have your Simpleware platform that bridges that gap. So going below is talking about the typical bottlenecks. On the bottom left here is typically workflow setup, image segmentation, image landmarking, and from the landmarking, doing measurements, defining cut planes. Those are pretty labor-intensive processes. So we've got some automation tools that we've been able to do. So the first level is, and I'll get into these, is scripting, so Python, C# APIs, and then we get into the machine learning-based AI. So these are auto segmentation tools some are off the shelf, and then we have fully customized end-to-end automated solutions, and those have been successfully deployed for customers processing hundreds or thousands of CT scans per month, or MRI scans, and fitting that into their workflow depending on what their workflow is, and then also enabling them to scale up. And that scaling up is only limited by compute power, not by hiring more engineers, more segmenters, more landmarkers for that. So it's really to automate the workflow and keep the expertise built into the algorithms, because segmentation isn't a fun thing, and you tend to have a lot of turnover with that. So getting into the platform here, Simpleware, we offer the typical platform. I won't belabor this point of importing image data, doing your segmentation, generating your models, measurement, scripting, all of that here. And then in addition, this 3D printing toolkit, which was recently added. So again, data working with surface models, a range of tools for preps, support structures. You can see in this facial 3D print here, you can add these support structures, embossing, pins, if you want to connect different parts of it, apply color proofing to check printability, and then exporting in 3MF, STL, OBJ, and all those different types of formats. So this is all within one software tool. You don't need to export it anywhere to prep this. And then the first level of automation, I call it, is the scripting. Again, the API, you can record macros, you can convert from a log, you can build plugins, and we also do services for a fully customized, where we'll write the script for you for our customers. And then now we get into what we call our second level of automation, which is these machine learning based auto segmenter tools. So we have what the first one's called AS Ortho. So these are tools we've built from data we've sourced and trained the ground truth. So these are anatomy specific automated segmentation tools and landmarking. So you can see all the landmarking, all the landmarks that are shown there, those are automatically picked off. So currently we have 4 automated segmentation tools for the ankle CT, knee CT, knee MRI, and the hip CT. So each segments bones and cartilage, identifies common landmarks automatically. And then the other one we have is AS Cardio. So this is for cardiac CT, 4D and 3D CT data can be imported, segmenting all the major vessels and major anatomies of the heart, and also providing landmarks. And I'll have a case study actually on this application as well. Then we come to our third level of automation, and this is the fully customized end-to-end solution. So this is not as applicable to 3D printing yet, I don't think. In the market, a lot of 3D printing is very customized. We've been, Corin is a nice example we have where we've deployed this for their hip, knee, ankle CT processing, where we've reduced time by 94%. This is built off of a kind of joint IP, and this is a custom solution developed for them and only them. And we've done this with other customers as well. This is the only one we can talk about. But so if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to talk to you about those. And then I'll get into an example of us, using some of these tools. So this is a full end-to-end workflow within a single environment and AI-based solution to reduce, in this case, we reduced it by 88%. So this was a nice example. This was with Nicholas Children's Hospital, Dr. Robert Hannon and his engineer, Thomas Hagland. So there's a 16-year-old patient. I think Jenny will understand the anomalous origin of the left coronary artery from the right sinus of Valsalva with intramural interarterial course. So it took me a while to practice that. So basically, it just means one of the arteries is squished. I'll show you what that means. But they were able to import your heart CT data. We can do 3D or 4D heart imports and do the segmentation. So this was a single click. You can see here, in the right, I think this is the right ventricle. These gray scales are really tricky to do with thresholding, things like that. So they just imported it, segmented the different geometries, the different arteries within our 3D printing toolkit. You can add the supports, you can add, the embossing, the lettering, all integrated. And off the shelf, this workflow would have taken them about 2 hours, but with ScanIP Medical and AS Cardio, it took them about 15 minutes for this particular case. So we're pretty happy with this. And they're quoting, our new engineer segmented it. Well, he hit the go button on AS Cardio and then added the base and supports very quick. So it was a nice, tidy case study. And you can see here with the model and the actual 3D print. And this one here gives you a nice view from the top where you can see this is the problem artery here. So they were able to print that nicely, show it to the patient. They're really happy with it. This is an ideal example. Obviously, the data isn't trained off of pediatric hearts, but it's worked well. We'll have a webinar actually in a month or so. And there we had another example with a 2-year-old where it didn't quite segment everything automatically. The right ventricle was a little cut off, the descending aorta wasn't there, but they spent 20 minutes to clean it up and then they were off and running. So still might not be a single click solution all the time because it's not trained off of the customer's data, but it's a good way to give you a good starting point. As I mentioned, it's the data dependent. We're very careful not to say, hey, this is a single solution for everything. Just push a button, push the easy button. It's not always that case. So I have a little blog here where I talk about, orthopedic revision planning. That's also an issue with a lot of noise and handling that. So with that, I think I'm doing okay on time here. I'll end it there just to say if you want to talk to me, reach out. Simpleware at synopsys.com is easy. We have trials, software demos, all that kind of stuff that you're, I'm sure, all very familiar with. So with that, I'll end it there. Thank you.
That's awesome, Karim. I've basically kind of was observing you guys Simpleware from 5-6 years ago all the way now. You've made a lot of progress. I'm really excited about where you are. We have a couple of questions from the audience. One is, have you guys tried it with animal models?
Actually, it's funny. We had one customer try it on a canine heart, and they actually said it worked pretty well. So, I guess the anatomy was close enough to the training. It all depends on what you train it with. But we're always curious to see what customer, if they take, when they get it, we say, please break this. Tell us what it doesn't work on. And actually, the canine worked well. So that was the only time I've seen it applied to an animal, but it's worth trying.
Awesome. There's another question. I think, I don't know if you can do this. Is that, have you done work with 4D time series modeling? So, one of those like cardiac MRI that has, is motion animated.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I don't know. I could ask our AEs about that if they've tried that. But I mean, if you've got data, we'd love to give it a shot.
I have seen in the past that Stratasys actually printed out some kind of model with with simulation of flow in a transparent model before. I don't know how they generated it. So that could be interesting. So thank you, John, for the question. We'll explore continuously. So anyways, anyone else has questions, please type into the question box. And okay.
No, that was me.
Oh, there are more questions just like suddenly popped up. Okay. The software that we're talking about, Vladimir, is from SimpleWear. It's called ScanIP, right? That's the software.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
SimpleWear ScanIP. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, SimpleWear. Any capability for prosthetics and orthotics with using your software applications? I
mean, for us, it's just conversion of, if you have someone's residual leg and you have an MRI or a CT scan of that. Certainly, we have customers doing that. Even people doing finite element modeling of that. Of the pressure between the limb and the cup. So yeah, if you have MRI data or CT data, that's where we would have an application for that type of thing.
I would love to try your software out. By the way, it sounds very interesting beyond just segmentation. Okay, so there's one last question here. Are you guys fully integrated with hospital EHR? That's very relevant.
Hospital EHR?
Yeah, like the Epic system.
Oh, I see. I mean, with ScanIP Medical, you can integrate through PACS, but nothing. Yeah, those kind of hospital type integrations. No, not that I know of.
Okay. Okay. One last question. I know it was the last question from Bob. Is there an API to output to other files format?
I mean, we have the scripting API. I'm not sure how deep you need to get the format you're interested in. So that's a question I'd have to pass to the AE. So if you want to shoot me an email, I'd be happy to pass that on.
Exactly. That's a very technical question, Bob. I think you can just message Karim directly on this platform and then exchange information and continue that conversation. All righty, Karim, you're awesome. Stayed on time. That was fantastic. We're going to move on to the next speaker. That's the most important thing for me. People stay on time. I want to introduce Shannon Walters. I've known Shannon for many, many years, ever since the beginning of my journey on healthcare 3D printing. He is the director for Stanford 3D and Quantitative Imaging Lab. And he's leading a very exciting team and does all kinds of exciting work. Like I said, I really want to have his job, but couldn't. So Shannon, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me. I've given talks like this multiple times, and I think that, we're all learning still. And I think as soon as you get into this, you start to realize every hospital is going to be different. So this is just a story, some ideas, and some gives you some reference for who you might connect to ask questions and stuff like that. But what I've noticed is everybody has different needs for 3D printing, and it's really finding those needs and finding a way to give the answers that we're really looking for here. So pleasure to be here, and I can't wait to share what I've learned. My goals for this are very simple: introduce my lab and discuss what we know about 3D printing in healthcare. And just a quick overview of our lab is we've been around for 25 years now, and so far Jenny's been around for almost all of these. She hasn't done the 3D prints with us, but she's known me. In that time she's known me, we've done about 1,700 prints. And beyond 3D printing, we provide like 3D imaging services for more than 50 clinical services in the adult and children's hospital. We use over 22 different softwares, not counting the people we're beta testing for. Wink, wink. Just kidding. So you might have your chance to try that software soon. Just letting you know, Jenny, if you wanted to, since you're still Stanford faculty, I believe, right? So, but we have 6 printers. We had a MakerBot that like we gave to another lab, but otherwise it would have been 7. And just so here's just some of the numbers. And the thing I want to point out about our lab and why we decided to get involved with 3D printing in the first place was that we have a cumulative experience of 3D imaging and segmentation of over 180 years of people where that's their primary job, just sitting there doing 3D imaging, these 22. A little more detail to follow. But other kinds of services we do other than 3D printing include tracking tumor response to let the oncologist know whether a specific treatment is being effective against the tumor, but based on standardized response criteria. We also provide treatment planning measurements, so for living-related donors or TAVR valves, helping them decide the size of the valve, the approach they should take to deploy those valves, and lots of other advanced visualization, colonography, calcium scoring, you name it. We do almost everything you could do with DICOM images, especially with CT and MRI. We're probably doing that in some way, shape, or form in our 3D lab. And 3D printing got added as one of those services about 7 years ago. My qualifications to give this talk, I've been in I've been an imaging specialist since '98, started in the military, got into 3D imaging as a full-time 3D imaging in 2007. And then 3D printing for me started around 2013. And at that time, as far as I'm aware, there were maybe a handful of sites that were doing it. Mayo was one of the big clinics at the time who was really big on 3D printing. And a lot of us learned from them early on. And now we're sharing what we've learned since then. I have a background in radiologic science for my bachelor's and information systems in my master's degree. And the lab, I've already gone through a lot of this stuff, so I'm not going to repeat that. We have multiple 3D printing technologies, and I'm going to show you a slide that kind of picture that does overview here. So what we've been working with is a PolyJet. We got our jet wash, we got a FDM printer, we got sterilized versus non-sterilized soak tanks for the SLA printers. We have a rapid SLA, like a DLP type printer, and some of the hobby grade printers. And so we've slowly evolved into this over time. We did not jump into the big guy right away, but I can tell you that big guy is what enabled this huge jump between 2019 and 2020. Giving that contrast between just a clear or single color, and then now actually being able to add that layer of different structures have different colors or different densities, or one is clear and the others are not. That really enhanced, from a clinician's perspective, it gave them different ideas for what they would want out of 3D printing, and that's how we really grew our business. COVID, you can't account for COVID here. So we dropped our volumes just a little bit, but if you were to look at the utility of each print between this year and this year has a lot more targeted, focused, meaningful prints. Whereas during COVID, everybody was trying everything to try to figure out how to solve a lot of different problems that popped up early in the supply chain, and those were included in this count. So. And I keep seeing reference to this Bison project out there. They're not counted in here. That project by itself was like about 300 prints all by itself. And I didn't put it in here because it doesn't involve the human body or human researcher at all. So I just kept that separate. Here's some categories of 3D printing. We got here quite a few different applications. These are recent prints here. These are ones you would not have seen if you saw my talk a year ago. This is a surgical simulation print where we actually model in, if they did a specific cut, how would that look afterwards? And we printed the result before they actually did it. This has not gone to surgery yet, but the goal was to inform the surgeon of how would their hand be configured. They're missing 2 digits if you can't tell. And that's to just help them get to a place where they can actually use them in a meaningful way, rather than right now how the thumb is stuck way out there and can't really grab. Mucormycosis is a disease in the lung that's quite deadly, and this print was more of an educational model for the surgeons to have on hand to show the patients if the disease is below a certain fissure, that it could possibly be cut out instead of treated in other ways. So they can actually do excision. And then there's lots of different prints we've done for congenital deformities. This one happens to have an ASD right here, and there's a VSD that I think is actually shown on the other piece that would go on top of this. This is kind of a cut plane that Karen was mentioning. Is we sliced it along a certain plane so that we could see right in there and see the valve and the ASD relationship. There's another piece that would go to this that shows the VSD that would be in front of this. We also have been collaborating with orthotics. This patient here had a calcaneus implant, and this is what it looked like immediately. And it's a little hard to tell if you're not used to this, but you can see it's no longer snug up against this bone as it is here. So basically everything's shifting forward, and they need to stop that. And traditional orthotics were not doing the trick. So we ended up trying to make something from a CT scan, but this was very close collaboration between the surgeon, the orthotist, and the 3D lab biomedical engineering team, trying to figure out, okay, what can we do to, first of all, stop the progress of that. And then this other one over here is more of thinking about how would you actually correct that. So we're just starting along that pathway. We're not experts at all, but I just wanted to show you some of the things that we've been working on here. Here's some more like stuff we've been doing over and over. So we're starting to redefine the standard of care. I wouldn't say that it's all the way there, but you can see that we've been given the maxillofacial team these mandibles showing where the nerve is, so they can have a little bit of a pre warning about if it's close to one surface, right or left, or anything like that. They've been looking at the imaging, but having this in their hand gives them the physical sense of it. As that's pretty much the use case from 3D printing since day one, is the surgeons do better with something in their hands. So, but our plans are to test out whether they can perform the surgery in advance. And the goal is to disarticulate this without cutting the nerve. You actually need to cut both sides of the bone in a very complex cut to be able to separate it and extend it and put in hardware. Some of these cases with unique valve sizings or specific highly calcified valves or whatever, we'll actually print out a valve, and then we'll actually print out the heart and the valve opening, and they can test the different size of valves and see how they think that works. That's not the only tool they use. It's not like the 3D printing drives the entire decision, but it helps give them some perspectives. This is a post-hole mount. Whenever they excise a prostate, they'll use this guide. We've cut into this slicing guide and this is specifically the distance of the MRI. And so when they do the slicing and the staining, then they can match that directly up with the MRI itself. And they don't really use this to drive any decisions before treatment, but what they do is it's a follow-up to say, was the radiologist report close to being reality? And then they're using that as a feedback loop to continually get better at the radiology part of identifying whether any of the lesions in the prostates are actually cancerous and how to grade them properly. And we've done, I think, 500 of those by this point, if not more. You can tell by this tray here, these recently printed breast flap reconstructions, that these are being done quite often. This is actually an idea I got at 3D Heals. I don't know if you can you remember that one, Jenny, the woman Tatiana from UCSF was. I got the idea from her, like, to do this. She didn't have this specific idea, but it inspired me to say, hey, we're doing some 3D imaging on breast flap reconstructions. Maybe we can actually do a 3D print and give them more meaningful data. And that's actually what turned out to happen is they want the print now. They don't care about the other 3D imaging. Having the print in their hand, they think is way more valuable. And you can see a similar thing is happening with the electrodes to anatomy mapping. They're not planning any, they're mapping out where the electrical storms are coming from by inserting all these stimulators, or not stimulators, but electrodes. But this helps map that triangulation to physical reality again. So when they actually go in to try to ablate that part of the brain that's causing electrical storms, they have this physical reference to go with. So if it says that it's triangulated between the third electrode here, the fifth electrode here, and the first electrode there, they can get a sense of triangulation there. And that's what they've been using this for, mostly for pediatrics. A fair number of our prints, I would say maybe 5% are really about supporting education in some way, not just patient education, but physician education training. Stanford has residents and fellows all over the place. It's a huge training institution. So it would be silly if our 3D printing did not support that pathway. So here's a few examples of us building a 3D print to support that pathway. And I'm not there while they're actually using it, but the mediastinum is more about, there's a lymph node in here somewhere, and they use this to actually like go into the airway and go perforate through it and access the lymph node for a lymphdectomy. Moya model just explains to the patient what everything's going to work like. They show how they're accessing the external carotid. They're going to create a titanium secure fasteners here and pass this through. And if you look at the other side of this, you'll see that it's connecting into their brain vasculature. And then this was more about explaining to patients who are going to pediatric patients, to their parents, what the procedure is going to be to fix cleft palate or whatever condition this particular one is. I can't remember all the details because there's so many things coming around. And then finally at Stanford, we're also a huge research. We're connected. We're part of the School of Medicine, and lots of people want this technology, and it uses the exact same skill set to do 3D printing in healthcare as to support the research. So what you're seeing here is something to do with the primate skulls, and this one has to do with actually measuring pressures, and it's simulating pulsation in the aorta. So we've modeled, this is a full aorta, but we've also modeled aortas like this with the dissection flap inside. And the challenge, it's very challenging. I'm not going to go into all the details because the scope of this particular talk is healthcare. So there's a few more prints I've done. This is not clinical. This is another education. This was just to see if we could print the nerve fibers. This was actually a patient education model. This was actually used to test whether or not they could get through this very tight angle of the aorta. You can see how it has a kink here. Whether they could pass a transcatheter aortic valve device up into the aorta and deploy it. And this actually confirmed that they could. So they actually used this whole print to verify they could get around that. And this is a closer look at those deep internal epigastrics and the electrode. This one, we happen to print both sides of the brain for this one. So. Now that's a quick look at the overview, but those are all nice and everything, but you don't just go making prints, right? It's not about just making random prints. You need to understand who needs what, how can you get it to them? And obviously you're going to be limited by the resources that you have available. So when I think of 3D printing, 3DP, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of these three things. It's kind of gimmicky, but it's an easy way to remember that the people involved drive what's needed, and that what's needed is driven by a process, and that process can't exist without any payment. So as you're setting up, or if you're already doing this, are you thinking of these things? How do you think about them? For us, we have physicians, obviously, that drive the requests. We have patients who need the care, researchers and students who are also getting in on the process of learning or testing, as I showed at Stanford. And so from our perspective, we need to know what to do. That's a request. We need to know when to do it. So we have a prioritization, and that's largely driven by if there's a surgery, what's the surgery date? We need to actually segment the data, obviously. Although if you could just 3D print the entire data set, then we wouldn't need a whole team of people. You could just push print. Beyond segmentation, you have to actually make a model that's meaningful. Do you need cuts? Do we need synopsis to let us cut things? Do we need filter floaters? We need to make sure it's watertight for the printing. And then we have to think about how do we deliver it? And then obviously billing. I should have billing around the entire thing, but we're focused on getting them the print and then figuring out the money. At Stanford, we're privileged in that respect, that we kind of have a lot of support, that we can do whatever's needed and then to go figure out everything on the back end. Not everybody else will be in that situation, especially if you have no printers to begin with.